Chapter 306, Magic Crystal Cannons. As soon as the Grand Duchess of Helen Duchy had departed, the previously dispersing fog slowly gathered once again. The sunny sky was shrouded by an inky cloak so black that one couldn't see their own fingers. The Helen soldiers who'd been rigorously pushing the cannons were so scared that they couldn't help but shriek. A shadow dashed erratically back and forth within the pitch-black darkness. Terrifying desolate screams echoed from the places where the shadow had glided past. These shrill screams would start up briefly before being abruptly cut off. The soldiers had been fought on the edge of death many times in their lives, so they quickly understood what it meant for the sounds to come to an abrupt end. The screams of those not reconciled to their fate were isolated by the darkness. The thick dark fog hid the brutal slaughter that was happening. When it completely dispersed, more than 40 bodies lay on the ground. Each had died with their neck pierced through by a sharp weapon. 6 crystal cannons, each 5 meters tall and 6 meters long, displayed vivid colors after the fog had cleared. The crystal cannons were refined from magic silver and a variety of other exotic metals. Their barrels were engraved with obscure microscopic magical arrays. The silver-gray crystal cannons were so heavy that they couldn't be moved easily. Black glossy spots sparkled like stars that were appearing together with the sunlight. Along with the glossy ephemeral sheen, stiff and heavy bodies appeared one by one out of thin air next to the crystal cannons. 60-some zombie warriors took careful control of the crystal cannons. Divided into 6 teams, they began to push the cannons down the bald mountain. The magic crystal cannons had been created in an ancient style, making them sturdy and heavy. Hauling them up the mountain was quite difficult, so it naturally didn't take much effort to push them down. The 6 magic crystal cannons were now pushed back down to the mountain's foot, using less than a tenth of the time through the combined efforts of 60 zombie warriors. Of course, these extremely large and expensive magic crystal cannons weren't protected only by those dozens of toiling soldiers. The guards who protected them from a further distance were still trapped within the dark fog. When the 1,000+ Helen soldiers at the mountain's foot saw the magic crystal cannons that they just pushed up with much effort quickly roll downwards with the help of their adversaries, they immediately knew that there was a problem. Not waiting for the 1,000+ soldiers to react, the ground at the mountain's foot suddenly split open, forming a gully with a large rumbling sound. The 6 expensive magic crystal cannons rolled downwards one by one. The gully was very deep and narrow. Even after waiting some time, no sounds of the heavy cannons hitting the bottom could be heard from the gully. Mission accomplished. The 60 zombie warriors vanished one by one amidst a black shimmer under the dumbfounded gazes of the soldiers at the mountain's foot. Only the deep tracks left by the rolling of the magic crystal cannons proved that they had indeed existed. "Sir Lieutenant, what do we do?" A captain looked helplessly at his lieutenant, asking helplessly as he glanced at the gully that was quickly closing up. "Inform her lordship the Duke. The 6 magic crystal cannons are worth 600,000 gold coins. Our lives are finished if we can't find it." The lieutenant looked terrified. He had initially planned on ignoring everything to run away. However, thinking of the cruelty that the Grand Duke was capable of, as well as his parents in Helen City, he secretly prepared for his death instead. As the two talked, the gully on the ground miraculously closed up after swallowing the 600,000 gold coins worth of magic crystal cannon. This incredible scene happening right before their eyes, as if everything was returning to normal, was both shocking and slightly calming, actually dissolving some of their inner fear. In the sky above the mountain, Valentina returned to Benedict Sackville's side with empty hands. The feathers of the fire phoenix danced, offsetting Helen's dazzling beauty even more as she rode in on the phoenix. "What happened?" "Nothing out of your expectations, right?" Benedict asked indulgently as he gazed at perhaps the most difficult prey he'd encountered in his life. Even though Benedict was already middle-aged, his elegant and noble intellectual temperament, coupled with the charisma of a mature man, were a fatal attraction for countless normal women. "He ran away." "It was an evil necromancer." Valentina relaxed her face into a subtle smile. She didn't hold back her smiling countenance, her tone slow and gentle. "So it was just a cowardly necromancer. He a minor character unrelated to the big picture. He shouldn't have any impact to our plan." Benedict secretly weighed the information and didn't comment much on the matter. He casually asked, "When will the magic crystal cannons arrive? I really want to see these despicable invaders blown to bits under their bombardment." "They are halfway up the mountain and will soon appear. I've spent a lot of money to buy these use 6 magic crystal cannons from the Brute Merchants Alliance thousands of miles away. Their power has been tested. You'll definitely see blood blooming like roses. Having destroyed an entire small forest in one test shot, Valentina could imagine the scene of her enemy's flesh and blood spewing messily in her head. She was so full of expectations after having gone through all this fire and blood to reach this point. Lord Duke, it's bad, things are very bad. The captain from the mountain's foot hurriedly scrambled over and shouted his report loudly with a terrified face. What happened? Valentina frowned, extremely displeased in her heart. She shouted at the lesser captain who disturbed her good mood. The 6 magic crystal cannons have all disappeared. The captain was extremely horrified but had resigned himself to articulating the truth and fear. Wah! What? Valentina was momentarily stunned as her spirits tumbled from the peak of satisfaction to the bottom of a deep abyss. She couldn't adapt to this kind of sudden reversal in fortune. As a result, she didn't realize that her usual graceful voice had become shrill. Some zombies pushed the 6 cannons down from the hillside, then a crack appeared on the ground and swallowed them all. The crack then closed up and the ground returned to normal. This is the truth. The captain hung his head as he quickly described the sequence of events. He didn't even dare lift his head to look at Valentina's eyes right now. An enormous fireball shot out, violently consuming the captain. Valentina's face was covered in a layer of frost as she screamed tragically. She rode the fire phoenix to the back of the mountain, her fury billowing to the skies. The phoenix flew quickly, surrounded by dancing embers. Benedict was certain that the soldiers responsible for transportation would face great suffering. Lord Duke, what should we do now? Do we still need to defend this small mountain? After Valentina left the bald mountain, a soldier standing tall next to Benedict with a straight posture and darkened face asked in a low voice. Shaking his head, the elegant and relaxed expression on Benedict Sackville's face vanished. His face turned stern as he barked, "This battle is purely a waste of troops without the magic crystal cannons. With no rewards to speak of, we naturally won't be engaging in this confrontation anymore. Let's go. We will immediately withdraw from this mountain. You only need to inform Kaba of Helen Duchy. I think he'll know what to do." Nodding, the soldier took his leave without another word and issued orders to retreat to higher-ranked officers. While Benedict Sackville was certainly pursuing Valentina, he was also scheming to swallow the Helen Duchy at the same time. By nature, Benedict Sackville was a duke interested in nothing but profit. He wouldn't expend his own power solely in the pursuit of romance. With the withdrawal of Narsendutchel in addition to Valentina's departure, the Helen soldiers also seemed to realize that the situation wasn't looking good. After some parleying, the commander of the Helen army decisively issued a retreat order. The soldiers from the 2 duchies defending the mountain valley withdrew as quickly as they could under a rain of arrows. The blazing fight had fizzled out as quickly as it had been ignited. 3,000 corpses had remained behind on the bald mountain after the battle stopped. The 2 enemy duchies, who had painstakingly waited for the Helen army to emerge from their city, now saw their chance as the soldiers cleanly withdrew. Their leaders instantly commanded the troops to go around the mountain and chase down the armies of the Narsen and Helen duchies. There were only 300 soldiers from the Edmund and Bonsen duchies left to clean up and scavenge the remnants of the battlefield on the mountain. The majority of troops had withdrawn after half an hour. The 300 soldiers cleaning the battlefield suddenly felt day turn into night as the sky was gradually covered by a thick layer of black clouds. As they gathered items off the corpses, the soldiers looked up at the green-black cloud layer in the sky with a head full of befuddlement. The 300 soldiers had only just completed the cleanup and collected all of the weapons and armor into 5 big piles when, much to their terror, the previously dead soldiers started to slowly writhe and stand up in grotesque postures. 3,000 corpses all over the place stood up and immediately surrounded the 300 soldiers cleaning up the battlefield. Under the canopy of necromancy, the 3,000 corpses didn't spend too much time to turn the 300 soldiers into more of their own. With now over 3,000 stiff resurrected corpses properly lined up in formation under Han Shao-O's evil manipulations, the undead army advanced towards Helen Duchy. Han Shao arrived at the exact place where Benedict Sackville had been standing. According to Trota's memories, Han Shao successfully dug his way underground and found the wealth that Trota had prepared for his children and mistress. Chapter 307, Divine Power. Han Shao conveniently shoved all 5 piles of collected items from the mountain into his space ring. Suddenly he saw an enormous halo of holy light shining upon the earth in a distance. he instinctively felt a disgust towards that sacred pure light. Strand of faint smoke drifted up in the light and dispersed into heaven and earth. Having collected all of the valuables in the bald mountain, Han Shao looked up to see the 3,000 plus zombies that had been walking towards the Helen Duchy turn to ashes upon being bathed in the holy light. None was left after a short span of a few minutes. Through the Yun demons, Han Shao saw a group of 4 gracefully drifting over on the back of war horses. 3 of them wore silver-gray armor with the Church of Light's cross engraved on the chest. The 4th was a light mage in white robe, a thick book of scriptures in his hand. A vast holy force overflowed with each page of the book being flipped. Helentina was advancing by their side on the back of the fire phoenix. Her beautiful face full of fury and cold killing intent, she quickly approached the bald-beaked mountain. A Yin demon was surveying and about to close in on these people for close detail when the white-robed mage with the scriptures in hand seemed to discover it. His bright and wise eyes staring right at in the Yin demon's direction, he paged through the scriptures in his hand. A bundle of white light abruptly shot out from a page and hit the invisible Yin demon in a second. The Yin demon that Han Shao had spent a great deal of resources to refine was enveloped in a strange force upon being hit by the white beam. It turned instantly to ashes. Even Han Shao's soul brand on it had vanished. A pair of thin eyes opened in the skies above Han Shao. The white-robed light mage abruptly closed the scriptures, his eyes as if piercing through layers and layers of obstacles to nail down Han Shao's body. The mage's peaceful voice resounded quietly, "He's on the bald mountain." The 3 silver-armored temple knights surged their war horses forward at the same time. The war horses moved like whirlwinds, galloping swiftly towards the mountain. The white-clad mage leisurely abandoned his warhorse and floated up, his speed even faster than that of the 3 temple knights riding warhorses. Helentina, gliding on the fire phoenix at a low altitude, cried out softly in anger after hearing the mage's words. The fire phoenix instantly shot in the air, tearing a blazing red across the sky and reaching the mountain in the span of a few breaths. Han Shao's anger had been ignited when the Yin demon was turned to ashes. He also became aware of the Church of Light's terrifying power at the same time. That light mage holding the scriptures in particular could easily kill a Yin demon with a simple gesture. Han Shao was instantly on his guard against this mysterious person and his scriptures. With the high speed of art of the mnemonic ninth heavens, in addition to the Earth elite zombie becoming invisible within the Earth, Han Shao wasn't worried about escaping. Therefore he didn't choose to retreat upon seeing the sky's eyes above his head. He'd wanted to at least face the light mage who destroyed his Yin demon and suss out the situation before deciding whether or not to temporarily retreat. The sky's eye formed over his head needed a constant supply of mental strength from the caster. When the light mage realized that Han Shao was remaining in the same place he no longer provided, supplied the sky's eye with mental strength and immediately withdrew it. Helentina landed in front of Han Shao like a flame under the brilliant sunlight in her fiery red magic robes. She was approximately 28 years old. Her soft expression covered in a layer of frost, she stared coldly at him from the super rank magic creature and shouted, "The 6 magic crystal cannons, hand them back over to me now." Han Shao looked up at her with a calm and national expression. He pouted before saying with a bland smile, "This is but some interest from your Helen Duchy. Remember this well, these 6 magic crystal cannons is only the beginning. I will make you spit back out everything you people have robbed of us these past several years." "Who are you?" Helentina burned with rage upon hearing his words. However, she seemed to remember something and inquired him about his identity. Hey, you will know," Han Shao replied casually. He then stopped caring about her and focused all of his attention on the light mage who'd arrived by now. "Please come with us to the Church of Light for a visit. As long as you confess your sins, the God of Light will forgive your reckless arrogance." The Red Archbishop Kasi looked peaceful, as if he was the host inviting his guest. Kasi and Ferguson were both Grand Magi. However, Kasi was also a wind mage in addition to being a light mage. Moreover, he held the divine artifact revelation of the Church of Light. He could borrow divine power from it, so his strength was much higher than the light Grand Magus Ferguson. Kasi was only 45 years old but had the honor of serving as the acclaimed Red Archbishop. This indicated that he was no simple character. The only person above the rank of Red Archbishop was the God of Light's messenger, the Pope. As the youngest Red Archbishop ever, he was the most promising candidate. candidate for the seat of the next pope. Sorry, I have no time. Han Shao looked remotely at Kasi, refusing outright. The three galloping temple knights had finally caught up. They'd come on the back of their war horses since the road on the bald mountain wasn't too windy. Standing on the mountain, Han Shao looked into the far distance and discovered that a team of a dozen silver-armored knights was gradually materializing. They seemed to be left behind by the foreign Kosi's group. My lord, we don't have to waste words on this heretic. He brutally killed Lord Ferguson. He should be burned for this sin. A temple knight glanced coldly at Han Shao and suggested to Kasi. The temple knights were a group of dedicated fanatics completely faithful to the God of Light. They themselves possessed extraordinary strength. Only when the God of Light recognized their existence and bestowed a blessing upon them could they be qualified as temple knights. The favor each temple knight earned was different in accordance to their strength of their faith as well as their own efforts. The strength of the temple knights could be distinguished based on the amount of the God's favor bestowed upon them. The temple knights who only received a hint of favor would have the insignia of the Holy Grail on the armor's chest. Those who received a lesser amount would have the olive branch insignia. Those with a lot of favor had the cross insignia. The temple knights who earned the blessing of a miracle could display their power to the highest possible extent. This type of temple knights was extremely rare and few, their insignia on the armor's chest being an angel statue, their strength comparable to a sacred knight. If a temple knight of this kind was a sacred knight himself, then his strength would be even more terrifying. However, these temple knights were simply too rare in the Church of Light. They wouldn't randomly leave the Temple of Light under normal circumstances, so those with the cross insignia on their chests were already the most powerful outside. Currently 3 of these temple knights with the cross insignia was staring raptly at Han Shao with fervent frenzied eyes. Han Shao became cautious upon seeing this kind of stubborn madness that belonged only to stubborn religious followers. Brian, please come to the Church of Light with us to give a clear explanation. I guarantee that the God of Light will forgive your recklessness no matter how grave your sins are. At most you'll only be imprisoned within the church. We won't take your life. The Red Archbishop secretly recalled the warning of the Lancelot Empire and tried his best to sound polite. Brian, so you are indeed that unlucky new city lord of Bretel City. I finally know the meaning in your words just now. HMPH, daring to grab my magic crystal cannons. You simply don't care about the lives of your people. Helentina had completely understood by now. Her pretty eyes drilled into Han Shao's body as she snorted. You can't try. Any duchy that dares try to pillage Bretel City will have to pay the price. Han Shao remained unmoved, only throwing Helentina a glance along with a cold warning. He then slowly took out the Demon Slayer edge and nodded towards the temple knight who'd first spoken. Come on, brave temple knight. As long as you win against me, I'll consider following you guys to the Church of Light. I think your Church of Light won't gang up on me, will you? But a despicable necromancer, it simply won't need a second person from us to make a move. The temple knight swung his silver spear to point at Han Shao and spoke in a righteous, awe-inspiring manner. The silver spear shone with a brilliant silver light. Han Shao was long since been familiar with this kind of silver fighting aura. However, the silver spear also contained a pure divine power in addition to the energy of the silver fighting aura. When the strange divine power merged with the fighting aura, the combination was much more powerful than the simple silver fighting aura. The temple knights had exchanged their faithful, steadfast beliefs for blessings from the God of Light, turning a strange power in addition to the fighting aura they bitterly cultivated. Not only did strange power protect them from the erosion of evil force, it also gave them the ability to purify the evil in this world. Normally the damage caused by dark and necromancy spells to temple knights was extremely limited. The temple knights possessed a very strong defense even against high-ranked dark and necromancy spells with terrifying lethality. On the other hand, the temple knights' weapons combined with the power bestowed by their god was terribly fatal to mages of the 2 aforementioned majors. Any undead creature touched by the silver spear would be unable to withstand it and be immediately turned to ashes. Chapter 308 Divine Weapon versus Divine Weapon. Han Shao's mind was calm, his expression ruthless as he watched the high-ranked temple knight of the Church of Light slowly approaching on the warhorse. He held the Demon Slayer edge in his right hand. As the space ring flashed, a tricolored bone staff appeared in his previously empty left hand. Han Shao was about to chant a high-level undead summoning spell when he saw revelation on the hand of Red Archbishop Kasi burst out with a vast brilliant holy light. This divine artifact flipped through through its pages quickly without any wind shocking even its owner. The tricolored bone staff of unknown material suddenly shone out brilliant yellow, blue and purple lights at the same time, the dark evil power crazily circulating. The lights of the three colors converged before shooting towards Revelation on Cassie's hand. Continuous flapping sounds traveled out as Revelation flipped rapidly. A beam of light drifted out with every page flipped, each light forming a miraculous word and joining a river of words flowing in front of Cassie. As soon as the marvelous words came into contact with the light from the tricolored bone staff, holy power along with evil power exploded at the same time. Violent air surged and rushed in all directions between Han Shao and Cassie. The incoming temple knight who was challenging Han Shao was pushed back by the terrifying power along with the other two knights. Valentina was also overwhelmed by the pressure on the back of the phoenix. She immediately struggled up to higher skies, horrified as she looked down at the happenings below. The previously refined and commanding posture of Red Archbishop Cassie had disappeared without a trace. He stood there trembling slightly, cold sweat flowing down his body as he looked at Han Shao, dumbfounded. He could feel the power all over his body pour crazily into the revelation in his hand. This situation had never happened before. Revelation was a book of scriptures in the Church of Light that had been left behind after Cassie's master had passed away. His luck had been excellent. He'd received this divine artifact after receiving the God of Light's recognition in a baptism in the Temple of Light. The artifact had been in his hands for merely 3 years, but everything had gone smoothly for Cassie with his identity as a Light and Wind Grand Magus. The situation had always gone favorably every time he'd used revelation against evil powers. He had never encountered this situation at hand. Han Shao held the bone staff, the mental strength in his entire being also madly attracted to it. The bone staff was rapidly absorbing his mental strength like a big sponge. When the mental strength poured into the staff, it seemed to resonate with the magic force of the bone staff itself, ultimately forming a strange tricolored light that all converged towards the revelation. Although he was at the rank of Grand Magus, Han Shao still felt slightly woozy when his mental strength was crazily sucked by the bone staff. However, his mind was much more resolute than ordinary people's in addition to his astoundingly strong body. This was why he wasn't trembling like Cassie with cold sweat flowing down his body. As the evil and holy powers intertwined, the terrifying impact swept away all of the obstacles between Han Shao and Cassie. Rocks shattered wherever this force passed through, the bald mountain shuddering violently, exploding where this impact spread through. Huge rumbling sounds echoed non-stop in the area between the two people. This evil force is so enormous that I'm sure that only the artifact of the Calamity Church's evil god can possess such power. Kill this ignorant heretic. The temple knight had been swept head over heels by the forces ricocheting between Han Shao and Cassie. After standing up with much effort, he was inwardly terrified of Han Shao's power. Upon seeing Cassie's body trembling, he immediately suggested taking advantage of this opportunity to kill Han Shao. How would the temple knights not know how powerful Red Archbishop Cassie was? The divine artifact of revelation in his hands had always been a nightmare for evil forces for many years. He hadn't expected that today a weak petty heretic such as the one they were facing would be able to measure up to the Red Archbishop Cassie. He was afraid of Han Shao's immense power, so he proposed the idea of killing the latter. The remaining two temple knights were watching the scene develop in front of them as they stood on the sides. As soon as they heard their brethren's proposal, they immediately turned their war horses toward Han Shao without another word. The three temple knights carefully avoided the center part of the still rumbling explosion, approaching Han Shao from the rear and two sides. In the holy light flashing out from revelation, they started singing praises about the glory of the God of Light. Streams of fighting aura filled with divine power flared out from their spears and attacked Han Shao. Seeing the Church of Light's despicable act, Valentina overhead curled up her lips with a trace of contempt. However, Han Shao was her enemy, while the Church of Light wasn't an entity a small duchess could offend. She just there silently and observed happily. Han Shao's mental strength infused the bone staff at a high speed. Coldly facing Cassie in a difficult struggle, he also had to guard against the three temple knights quickly drawing close. He could neither move his body nor make use of his mental strength. However, His demonic magic was still available. A stream of magical yuan flowed into the demon slayer edge in his right hand under the control of his mind. After having absorbed a massive amount of the souls recently, the demon slayer edge now had a faint trace of terrifying killing intent that belonged to an unparalleled weapon. Upon being infused with magical yuan, it was akin to a murderous magic beast who'd caught the delicious smell of blood after being trapped for tens of thousand years. The demon slayer edge suddenly moved of its own accord and left Han Shao-Oh's hand with a loud howl. A dense mass of star-like spots gathered into blood clouds. An endless resentment from the demon slayer edge along with tyrannical murderous intent had formed a massive layer of blood-red clouds. The blood clouds blotted out over half of the sky above the bald mountain. The thick blood smell seemed to contain an attack on the soul. The three temple knights weren't the only ones to feel that the situation had taken a bad turn. Even Valentina, who'd soon flown up high, was also surrounded by the vicious, terrifying air of endless fear. Her head dizzy and her chest heavy with the urge to vomit, a crazy obsession gradually surged within her heart. Valentina knew that things were very bad. She hurriedly chanted an incantation to form a fiery red magic cage enveloping both herself and the phoenix. The phoenix's wings were like a colorful ribbon, fire sparkles flashing each time they flapped. Fiery light shot out in all directions from the fire magic cage. She finally managed to suppress the nauseous feeling of wanting to vomit. She urged the phoenix away from Han Shao, angry and somewhat scared as she watched the battle of the two weapons above the mountain valley. The murderous intent reaching the sky from the demon slayer edge had even formed an attack on the soul. Its target wasn't Valentina in the sky, which was why she could defend herself, albeit with some difficulties, by resorting to the fire magic cage and the purifying fire of the phoenix. On the other hand, the Church of Light's three temple knights weren't so comfortable like her. The demon slayer edge danced wildly above Han Shao's head. The murderous intent of this peerless weapon wasn't weak at all against the other divine artifact. With the demon slayer edge as the center, layers and layers of thick clouds dyed the entire sky a blood red above the mountain. The three temple knights who tried to take the opportunity to attack Han Shao was violently shaken by the soul attack. Their warhorses let out a scream and fell down. The three knights jumped down with stumbling steps, their bodies shaking. Blood flowed from their nostrils, streaming down their necks and chests like two wiggling worms. The three temple knights temporarily didn't know what to do in the face of this unfamiliar evil force. This evil force wasn't like the quiet, mysterious darkness of the Calamity Church. It was a mad, furious bloodlust with the cruelty and arrogant desire for the destruction of everything. The three temple knights had to raise their spears and sing loud praises in order to obtain even more holy force whilst suffering through soul-piercing agony. Brilliant halos flashed on their bodies, constantly resisting against the force that was invading their flesh. The demon slayer edge had mobilized every ounce of its stored deathly soul force after having absorbed 90% of Han Shao's magical yuan. It formed an evil magnetic field that also possessed the ability of attacking the soul and started eroding the essence of every living being that were enveloped within. Revelation was already struggling against the invasion of the tricolored bone staff. Kasi couldn't help but almost groan audibly when he saw Han Shao's demon slayer edge display an unfamiliar, terrifying force. The demon slayer edge spun in a circle around Han Shao's head and slowly gathered a beam of bloody light to shoot at Kasi. Kasi desperately controlled his mental force to chant an incantation after biting the tip of his tongue. A flower of blood bloomed on one of the pages on Revelation. The divine artifact immediately stopped turning its pages and was quickly put away by Kasi. The bone staff that seemed to struggling with its rival also immediately dulled and stopped absorbing Han Shao's mental strength when Kasi speedily withdrew Revelation. Only the demon slayer edge's beam of bloody light still shot insistently towards Kasi. Chapter 309. The mighty Kasi himself had suffered internal injuries. He instantly panicked upon facing this murderous intent from the demon slayer edge's attack. He hastily took out a magic scroll from the space ring and released the magic within. A silver halo wrapped around his entire body as he also hurriedly chanted a magic incantation at the same time. cold winds whistled as sharply as knives, forming an enormous tornado that roiled up to block the Demon Slayer Edge's swift attack. The descending Demon Slayer Edge fell into the big tornado, its speed slowed by the cold winds. In addition, the raging murderous intent was also somewhat scattered. The Demon Slayer Edge destroyed the obstacles posed by the whirlwind and immediately shot towards the silver halo released from Cassie's magic scroll. It was once again blocked by the strange energy in this silver halo. The Demon Slayer Edge was now at the end of its strength. It could only make Cassie spit out a mouthful of blood but couldn't threaten his life. Protect the Lord. The three Temple Knights couldn't help but cry out in panic upon seeing Cassie's misery as well as Han Shao-Oh's ferocity. Blood dripping out of their mouths, they staggered in a charge toward Han Shao and Cassie. Han Shao-Oh's body was also currently in a very bad state. The bone staff had suddenly gone out of control and absorbed 9 out of 10 parts of his mental force. The three Temple Knights had then come attack him. Then the Demon Slayer Edge had absorbed more than half of his magical yuan. His current strength was now far less than normal. Han Shao was now unable to release another equally powerful attack after the Demon Slayer Edge returned after injuring Cassie. He immediately chanted an incantation upon seeing the three Temple Knights approach. The little skeleton Earth Elite Zombie and Wood Elite Zombie suddenly appeared afterwards. The little skeleton was still riding the undead creature that looked like a giant undead porcupine. The Earth Elite Zombie and Wood Elite Zombie each rode a fire-spitting warhorse. The three fellows immediately caught the smell of something disgusting as soon as they appeared in this dimension. They were instinctively irritated at the smell of the three Temple Knights who were loudly singing praises for the God of Light. The three strange dark creatures charged out without needing for Han Shao-Oh's instructions. They flew straight at the three Temple Knights, seemingly wanting to destroy these hateful knights immediately. Humphrey, lowly dark creatures suffer the anger of the God of Light. The Temple Knights raised their voice, waving their silver spears with the intention to send off these reckless dark creatures back to the dust. Unfortunately, these three undead creatures had been refined using the secret method of demonic magic. They were fearless towards the purification ability of the God of Light. The silver spears didn't disperse their souls, turning them to ashes upon contact like the Temple Knights had expected. Among these three undead creatures, the little skeleton was first to attack. The bone knife in his hand swayed unhesitatingly to block the silver spear. During this process, the bone knife that the little skeleton was holding abruptly went through some weird changes. The solid bone knife suddenly wriggled madly like a living creature. The bone knife that originally possessed the length of only a dagger grew at a very fast pace and turned into a 3 meters long blade in just a second. The long knife had yet to stop its peristalsis. A million of insects now seemed to be wiggling on its blade. It gave one a scalp tingling feeling just by looking at it. Sharp little spikes slowly appeared on the knife's blade, covering it in sharp little spikes and making it look eerily ferocious. This process had taken a long time to describe but had actually happened in just the blink of an eye. It had finished transforming to a 3-meter long sword in the instant that the little skeleton swung it up at the silver spear. The little skeleton himself was only 1 meter 30 centimeters tall, looking comical as he held the long blade. However, deathly aura filled the sky with a swing of the long sword in the little skeleton's hand. The dense sinister air encompassed tens of thousand years accumulation of desolation. This despairing atmosphere revealed a taste of endless death in which the godly power within the Temple Knight's silver spears was simply unable to purify. Riding the massive porcupine-like undead creature, the little skeleton dove down from high above with an enormous rumbling sound. The long sword brought with it a deathly air that filled the skies, hammering straight down on a Temple Knight and forcing him to his knees. This Temple Knight had previously suffered serious internal injuries from the corrosion of the Demon Slayer Edge. Now that he took a violent blow from the little skeleton, his knees couldn't withstand the pressure and shattered with cracking sounds. Not waiting for the knight to react, the little skeleton's long sword pierced through his silver armor. The little skeleton lifted up the Temple Knight on the tip of the blade and flew over to Han Shao in a triumphant manner. Han Shao didn't need to take a look to know that this Temple Knight was already done for. Otherwise the latter wouldn't be lying still without any resistance. When the little skeleton neared the hideous 3-meter-long sword flicked, the temple knight spun and flew with the wind before crashing down right at Han Shao-Oh's feet, his body completely devoid of life. Temple knights who could release silver fighting aura were naturally skyriders. It was a pity that Temple Knight had already been heavily injured and had somewhat underestimated the little skeleton. Therefore the terrifying powerful little skeleton had easily slain him. As for the remaining two knights, they had stood quite a distance from Han Shao, so they wasn't much affected by the Demon Slayer Edge's corrosion. Moreover, the Earth Elite Zombie and Wood Elite Zombie weren't as horrifying as the little skeleton. The two Temple Knights didn't fall in defeat as fast, even though they had difficulties defending against the two zombies' endless skill sets. Valentina was still hovering on the phoenix, shocked as she looked at the happenings below. She originally intended to take advantage of the situation whilst the two sides battled, but now could only stare dumbly at the situation of the Red Archbishop Kasi and the three Temple Knights. Not only were they unable to kill Han Shao, one of them was dead while the other three suffered serious injuries. Her heart fell into disarray with panic. Han Shao stood arrogantly below, his eyes coldly watching the surroundings. Valentina constantly weighed up the gains and losses. On one hand she was scared of Han Shao's astonishing strength, on the other she was heartbroken over the 6 magic crystal cannons. After a while of hesitation, the magic crystal cannons worth 600,000 gold coins washed away some of her fear for Han Shao. Valentina saw Kasi fleeing in a panic towards the foot of the mountain. The little skeleton astride the skeletal undead creature in hot pursuit with a 3-meter-long blade in his hand. Valentina had no time to debate any longer. She released a mass of flames that burned the clouds along with the phoenix. Her staff embedded with a firestone and her ring that enhanced mental strength further spread out the flames to cover half the sky. The sea of fire churned and spread to envelop Red Archbishop Kasi. Kasi, who was escaping in panic, soon sensed the strangeness over his head. He didn't forget to release a wind magic despite his trepidation. The wind magic blew the blazing flames towards the little skeleton and Earth Elite Zombie, forcing them to suspend their chase. Undead creatures were born and lived in a gloomy and humid strange world, an endless realm of desolation that was forever unable to witness the sunlight. Therefore they felt an instinctive disgust towards the light and high temperatures. When the raging flames shrouded over Kasi, the three undead creatures, little skeleton, Earth Elite Zombie and Wood Elite Zombie, didn't immediately charge at him. Lord Kasi, Lord Kasi. The distant group of Temple Knights had finally caught up with a great deal of road dust. These Temple Knights mostly had olive branches or Holy Grail insignias on their chests, which corresponded with the power of Senior Knight and Earth Rider. They were obviously weaker than the previous 3 experts whose insignia was the cross. However, their numbers were numerous. Moreover, they all had the ability of purification towards undead creatures thanks to the God of Light's blessing. It was indeed unrealistic for Han Shao to attempt to drown them in a grand army of undead creatures, particularly when considering the presence of the Light Grand Magus Kasi. Kasi was now seriously injured and had expended a great deal of spirit power. He immediately shouted upon seeing the Temple Knights finally arrive, "Kill this heretic, his dark heart should not exist in this world of light." Kasi previously had wanted to persuade Han Shao with kind words, but he had experienced the latter's power and even taken serious damage. Therefore Kasi no longer had benevolence or mercy heart. Absolutely frightened of Han Shao's evil power, Kasi immediately ordered everyone to kill him. The Temple Knights who just arrived saw Kasi's group in their miserable state. They instantly followed Kasi's order to charge at Han Shao, standing on the mountain in a terrain full of holes and pockmarks. The two Temple Knights, who were out of breath in a struggle under the attacks of the Earth Elite Zombie and Wood Elite Zombie, tried to shout a warning equals, "Be careful of his dark creatures. They don't fear the holy power, they even have mysterious skills. Be very careful." As the Temple Knights chatted, a team of the Calamity Church's death guards in pitch black armor appeared in another corner of the mountain. A necromancer in black magic robes was amongst the death guards troop. All them ran desperately in the mountain. The necromancer spoke in a lowered, worried voice, "Hurry, Brian cannot die no matter what. Even though he accidentally hurt some of our people, you absolutely shouldn't harbor any dissatisfaction. Many people among the death guards had bleeding noses and mouths. It seemed the demon slayer Reg's murderous intent had also hurt them. The eyes of the black-robed necromancer shone with excitement. He murmured, "Why is the divine artifact of the bone staff blessed by the evil god in his hands?" Chapter 310, Captured Alive. Han Shao stood tall on a bald mountain, looking without fear or anxiety at the incoming temple knights. His mental force and magical yuan had been restored somewhat. Although he'd be hard-pressed to win against the temple knights, it wouldn't be difficult if he wanted to leave leisurely. Han Shao hadn't released the other two Yun demons since Revelation had destroyed one of them. Thus, he didn't know that aid from the Calamity Church had appeared near Bald Mountain. He was about to leave when his consciousness sensed another presence. When Han Shao's soul had formed a consciousness at the separate demon realm, his senses had become much more sensitive. When he'd sensed that sinister presence, a thought struck him. Last time in the Valley of Sunshine, Edwin had once said that the Calamity Church would appear when Han Shao needed them the most. It seemed Edwin hadn't lied. Han Shao had been standing on the mountain, but immediately soared high with a thought. He saw a necromancer leading a group of death guards and death knights rushing over. The mountain had become riddled with potholes under the bombardment of the divine artifacts. However, these death guards and death knights were sprinting over as if they were on flat ground. Within the temple knight's thick layer of protection, Red Archbishop Kazi was thinking to himself on a warhorse. He looked up at Han Shao, not knowing what to do. These temple knights had extraordinary power and were high in number, but it was a pity that they didn't have flying magic beasts. They had no other way but to look helplessly at facing Han Shao high in the sky. Red Archbishop Kazi could use magic to fly, but didn't dare to pursue due to his grave injuries. Helena looked indecisively at Han Shao from the back of her phoenix, her pretty face darkened calculatingly. She hesitated, not knowing if she should take this opportunity to chase after Han Shao. If Helena hadn't seen the great battle between Han Shao and the Church of Light, she certainly wouldn't have hesitated to charge at him right now and wrest back the 6 magic crystal cannons that he'd taken. Unfortunately, the battle right before her eyes just now had given her a clear understanding about Han Shao's terrifying power. Pointing at Helena, Han Shao said with a jeering smile, "You still want the magic crystal cannons?" Upon Han Shao's disdainful glance, the originally hesitant Helena couldn't suppress the anger that instantly ignited throughout her body. It pushed aside the fear of Han Shao from her heart. She patted the phoenix and dived towards him. The temple knights were standing on one side of the mountain valley, and Han Shao could clearly see the reinforcements from the Calamity Church also arrive in the mountain valley. A malicious idea suddenly struck Han Shao. He immediately chanted an incantation to send the little skeleton, the Earth Elite Zombie and the Wood Elite Zombie, back to the strange dimension before flying out of the mountain valley with a long string of laughter. "Damn it, he's leaving just like that." The leading necromancer of the Calamity Church started to pause when he saw Han Shao fly away from the mountain. "It's the Calamity Church, they must be with that heretic." The temple knights had discovered the Calamity Church's people climbing up from the foot of the mountain at this moment. The feud between the two had lasted for hundreds of years. The accumulated hatred between the two sides was definitely bigger than the one building for Han Shao. Therefore the Church of Light's temple knights had almost no hesitation at all when they heard this shout. They started attacking the Calamity Church's forces as soon as they appeared. The moment the battle broke out, both sides slaughtered each other until their eyes were shot with blood. Everyone prayed to their respective god as the battle grew into full swing. The necromancer leading the Calamity Church's group intended to rescue Han Shao from the Church of Light and grow closer to him that way. Unfortunately, his calculations had gone down the drain. Han Shao had quickly left this chaotic land with the fast speed of the art of the mnemonic ninth heavens, leaving a bunch of sworn enemies to fight each other. "This despicable fellow is even more despicable than us," the necromancer grumbled. It was unknown whether he was praising Han Shao or cursing him. Either way, after he finished voicing those words, he immediately focused on directing the death guards to battle the temple knights. "Shameless necromancer, return my magic crystal cannons." Helena rode the wind on the back of her phoenix and chased after Han Shao, her soft lips crying out non-stop. Han Shao used the speedy art of the mnemonic ninth heavens to quickly leave the area and landed on a lush mountain valley. Now that he was out of the reach of Kasi's revelation artifact, Han Shao immediately released the remaining two Yin demons. Although the Yin demons seemed to be flying disorderly, they could actually observe Helentina's every movement. Upon arriving at the mountain valley, Helentina finally saw Han Shao slow to a stop with the little skeleton on the strange undead creature appearing next to him. Rage having overwhelmed her rational thought, Helentina urged the phoenix to shoot straight toward Han Shao. The phoenix emitted a melodic sound before spraying out a blazing hot flame. Helentina waved her firestone-embedded magic staff. Bowl-sized fireballs one by one appeared, blasting towards Han Shao and the little skeleton in a dense rain. The little skeleton grasped the 3 meters long knife and tapped on the undead creature he was riding with the handle. The undead creature opened a huge mouthful of sharp fangs and howled at the sky. Green glowing wraiths floated out from its mouth, their green sheen glimmering as they brought with them the thick presence of death from the other dimension. The wraiths started to madly absorb the deathly air floating around Mountain Valley as soon as they appeared in this world. The wraiths' bodies had originally appeared with barely a glimmer of light. Their bodies slowly expanded and condensed into the appearance of green liquid under the pressure blowing from the undead creature's mouth. They rammed violently towards the densely packed fireballs. The wraiths had absorbed energy from dead souls and rapidly swelled up to the point they couldn't hold their shapes anymore. They exploded in midair. Deathly air covered the sky in gray-green mist. Ice-cold breaths beat at the pack of fireballs, slowly dissipating the brilliant light of the fireballs. Upon seeing the light from the fireballs dissipate, the little skeleton urged his huge undead mount to dash towards Helentina. Undead creatures bore a natural hatred for the light of fire. However, the glossy bones of the little skeleton were highly resistant to fire magic despite his hatred. He wasn't truly afraid of fire. As soon as the deathly air destroyed the dense fireballs, the little skeleton held his long blade and charged ferociously to face Helentina as per Han Shao's command. When the little skeleton neared the Helentina's phoenix emitted a massive flame, the high temperature causing every green plant around the mountain valley to wilt and die. Only several towering big old trees held up thanks to their firm roots. At this time the demon slayer rage howled as it drew across the sky with the speed of a meteor crossing the horizon, dragging a long purple tail behind it. It instantly arrived by the side of Helentina and the fire phoenix before circling upwards. Purple dancing spellfire suddenly appeared like a star and sprinkled down on the flaming body of the fire phoenix. The fire phoenix suddenly issued a sharp cry. The super rank magic creature then opened its beak to speak in human language, its girly sweet voice resounding. "What is this? It's so cold." A bone-chilling cold spread as the purple spell fire descended. Sizzling sounds crackled all over the fire phoenix's body. It suddenly felt its steely bones stiffen up, the flapping of its wings becoming increasingly heavy. The phoenix lost altitude and began to slowly fall down to the depths of the mountain valley with Helentina on it. "Big sister fire phoenix, what's wrong?" Helentina hastily called out in panic. "I don't know, my body feels really uncomfortable." The phoenix also cried out, not knowing what to do or how to stop the descent. She was also very afraid of this unknown cold invading her body. The two female creatures fell down about to hit the ground when the branches of the nearby towering old trees suddenly twisted tightly like an octopus tentacles around them, not letting them move one bit. "Damnable necromancer, how are you able to use the natural ability of the druids?" The phoenix's crisp and clear voice constantly complained after she was tied up by the branches. Helentina struggled with the firestone-embedded magic staff in her hand. She tried to chant it a fire magic incantation. At this moment a vicious long and sharp knife kissed her white slender neck. At this moment, Helentina lifted her head to see the odd little skeleton. The 7 wing bones behind his back were fluttering gently. The lengths of his body and the long knife in his hand were completely at disproportionate odds with each other. An eyeball sparkling with a purple light was staring straight at Helentina, making all the hairs on her body stand on end. "What do you want?" Helentina looked coldly down at Han Shao below and asked vengefully. Someone like her, who'd been through the baptism of blood and fire to reach her current position, actually restored her calm bearing at a time like this.